Sleight of Mouth was mostly developed by Robert Dilts and also slightly Doug O'Brien, who brought some touch on it. They were outlining, especially Robert Dilts, the main conversational maneuvers that all of the greatest leaders of history were using. It was aimed at codifying the best ways great communicators are adapting their language so that they can become more persuasive and eventually transfer more greater ideas into the world. The Magical Linguistics model that I have developed a few months ago is a variation of that Sleight of Mouth model. I am currently writing a book on that. At the moment of this video, I am 200 pages down into it, and probably 200 more will have to be written before it is ready. Basically, the model I wanted to develop is not better or less good than Sleight of Mouth. It is simply a different intent. My intent with that model is not to make any value contest on who's the best, whatever. It is about providing something that I think will be easier to learn and will make it easier for beginners to learn the patterns and put them into use in their real life, both in a professional context if they are coaches or therapists, and in a personal context if you have to confront some people who don't think like you and who try to impose that you should think like them. How can you defend against that without any physical violence, obviously? The way I see it, the model of Dilts was really made or intended to encapsulate as many patterns as possible into one model, to really take all the things the greatest leaders and communicators of history have used and to put everything in the model, which was a pretty impressive attempt. And I wanted my version to be simpler, to only focus on which ones of them, of all of those great patterns Dilts have developed, which ones of them are the most useful and the easiest to put into use and the most effective based on my experience having used the Sleight of Mouth for years and years. What did I and some friends of mine found the most effective and the most going straight to the point when you want to reframe a limiting statement or anything with which you disagree. And I won't really mention the other variation, which is the model of Michael Hall, the Mind Alliance model. Funny enough, preparing this video, I tried to ask to ChatGPT to give me a visual representation of the Michael Hall model. I'm not sure this looks like anything, but you get the point. The Michael Hall version was maybe what Dilts has tried to do, but even more patterns into it. So I really go at the other side of that intent, and without dismissing what those brilliant authors did, I want my version to be more accessible, even for somebody who doesn't have a degree in linguistics, even for somebody who doesn't really understand NLP yet. Even for people like that, how can they develop skills easily and fast with those techniques? So to give you the main differences, the similarities and the differences between the Sleight of Mouth model, the original one, and the model I am developing, Magical Linguistics. First of all, the only thing I really added from scratch that is not contained in the Sleight of Mouth original model is the pattern Interupt in my model, which is not something I invented. It is something you definitely know, but I included it into the model because I think it is a conversational tactic that we haven't really codified. The world of NLP, outside of the handshake interrupt of Richard Bandler, everybody knows that, but outside of this, the conversational pattern interrupt is something that I don't think has been clearly codified in any model that I know of. Many videos I made on that topic received a lot of interest. For example, the one coming from the TV show Daredevil, where some guy is interrupted by the lawyer.
Does this happen often?
It's been a bad week. Shit.
Put it down! Put it down! Back off!
There's innocent people
I
here.
got nothing to do with you!
You're gonna hurt somebody.
I'm not gonna tell you again. Put it down! Now!
Hey, asshole! How many priors you got?
What'd you say to me?
I'm the pro bono suit you'll try to retain after you go down for this. Only not even my soft-hearted partner will take your case, or any other self-respecting attorney in Hell's Kitchen. Not because you're so badass, but because you're just that stupid.
And this ability to say the one thing that is going to silence the person at least enough to get their attention, because they may not be convinced yet, but at least to get their attention, that is something that linguistically I haven't really found many sources, and I have included that therefore at the beginning of one of the first 2 chapters of my book for how does that work and how can you make that automatic. Because there are some techniques like using some nonverbal changes, using some absurd comments that will create an interruption in the conversation, allowing you to capture the attention of the person and at least make them drop down the level of aggressiveness they may have. There are some techniques to accomplish such result. And most of the time when a pattern interrupt will happen in a conversation, it will be spontaneous by using any other ones of those linguistic patterns. However, the criteria that differentiates if, or like that, dictate how likely you are going to succeed in creating an interruption like this in the conversation, the criteria that dictates that is how well do you understand, do you clearly see and understand the personality and the background, the life story of the person you are interacting with. The more you understand where they are coming from and where their beliefs are coming from, the more easily you can create such interruption that will position you as the highest authority in that conversation and will allow you to proceed with what you have to say even if they disagree. Doesn't mean they should be forced to obey what you think. At least they should be forced to listen to you if you have been listening to them. That is my point of view here. How can we make sure in the conversation everyone respects each other? And some people are just not willing at all to respect you. In that case, a pattern interrupt will be of great use. Then we have the Metaframe, which is the only one I don't think I really changed anything about this one from the Sleight of Mouth model compared to the other patterns. I guess the Metaframe that I'm talking about is kind of the same as the one Dielt is talking about. From my perspective, probably the same. It is about getting out of the conversation and seeing that conversation from an outside perspective. Not just the topic of the conversation, because we can play at, oh yeah, you see that from the perspective of a Jewish person, you see that from the perspective of a religious person, from the perspective of X or Y. No, this is something else. What I'm talking about when saying a Metaframe is you directly comment on this conversation. You and me right now, I don't like this, for example, if it is an interruption. You and me right now, I'm talking to you in this way, you say this, I don't like that. Can you please rephrase? That is more the Metaframe perspective on owning the conversation from above. And when you can master that one, same thing, you can be put in a place of authority in many more conversations than you used to. And many times when people don't wish to listen to you or think you are not valuable enough to be able to speak, well, once you master this kind of pattern, definitely you can get above that. Just enough to, again, earn respect. It's not about forcing people or trying to bully anyone. It is about earning respect in the conversation. Then we have the two that are very similar, both in my model and the one from Diels. What he called the intention pattern and the consequence pattern. I called that the original intent and the resulting outcome, which is obviously very similar. I simply generalized that to the past and the future, okay? So it is simply whenever the conversation is centered on what happened before, if the argument or the limiting belief is about I drink too much alcohol, okay, if you go down intent, what initially made you start? If you go resulting outcome, what do you think will happen years from now if you don't stop? Simple, okay? Past, future. Doesn't need to be more complex than this. Then we have the specifics, which any person who has a beginning of an understanding of NLP knows about. It is the meta model. How can we get more specifically into what they think, the details, the specific people, the facts, how many times do they do the negative behavior they want to get rid of, all those more specific criteria. And if this is confusing for you, you just summarize that to how do you know that? This is the simplest way of using the meta model or the specifics in that model. It is to ask the person, how do you know that? As simple as that. How do you know that? Or my perspective specifically is this one. Which part of my perspective do you disagree with? Specifically. specifics. That way you make the conversation more concrete and avoid getting lost into subsequent arguments that are leading nowhere. You stay focused on the main thing that has to be discussed. Then we have the analogies that Robert Diels was calling metaphors. In my version of it, I have included the metaphor component, coming mostly from Milton Erickson. I have included some part of metaphoric thinking, but most of that to me is also the simpler version of the metaphor. It is just, this is like that. X is like Y. This is like that. You are like me. You are like this person. You have a problem with alcohol. You remind me of, you are like Johnny who had a problem later and he recovered. You don't think you can succeed. You are like the person who thought he could not succeed and now can. Whatever it is, just one link from A to B. Doesn't need to be more complex than this. One link from one thing to the other, and this is about creating better links in the conversation between what the person thinks they can't accomplish and resources that will make them overcome those limitations, for example. Then we have the trickiest of those, the alternative map and alternative views. The alternative map in that model, compared to the one from Diels, it might relate to the model of the world, reality strategy, or even the change of frame size slightly from what he outlined. In this version, basically, I point out the value system. In the map of the world, it is just what do they, the person you talk to, what do they attribute more value to and why? Why do they attribute more value to this? Whether they preach for socialism or capitalism, whatever they preach for, why do they attribute more value to this? Which facts, details, and other people in that context do they attribute more importance to? Because if you don't clearly understand what their map is made of, you may argue against a wall, which won't concede anything, which won't let you win over anything, because you are not arguing about the same thing. You are not debating about the same thing. So the alternative map is about figuring out their value system. Also the hierarchy of criteria from Diels might be fitting into that category. It is everything that will make you understand what does that person is cherishing the most, is valuing the most. And based on that, you can articulate much more interesting and relevant reframes than if you were trying to reframe based on your map of the world, which is a dead end. Because the person might not have the same value system. If you believe in God and they don't, it's just a no-go, like no way this is going to end well in most circumstances. So understanding their map of the world first before arguing against anything. And then the alternative views is even trickier. It is the resulting pattern of the alternative map. It is, okay, based on the alternative beliefs I hold for granted, or based on what that person holds for granted, which other ways do we have of calling those, of attributing meaning to this or that fact? That may be a bit theoretical. Basically, I translated as the best ones I could find of linguistic formulas. The simplest one is X is actually Y. The meaning of this is actually that. It is what Robert Diels called the redefine. In this one, I have included all the things that Bandler and Grinder initially called content reframing and context reframing. All of them at the same time. Whenever you call one thing another thing, okay, alternative views. It is simply a different way of saying this is that. It is not war, it is divergent political interest. I did not yell at you, I taught you a lesson. You are not fucked up, you are simply learning how to recover. All of those are just a different interpretation for the same event. When we stay in the realm of the same event, the same fact, we can just call that fact another name, another thing. Politicians do that all day long. They use the same exact facts, economic factors or whatever, and they attribute a different meaning or terminology to explain what it means. As simple as that. But I had a lot of trouble writing this chapter because this one is made at the moment this video is being recorded. I had some trouble. It was challenging to write this chapter because even if all of those formulas are kind of automatic in my mind, I had to really dig into the linguistic research to figure out how can I present that so that even somebody who does not have my experience can understand it. And that was very challenging because I was not used to go that deep in details for how can we translate something that communicators of high level do automatically into terms and formulas that anyone can use. Another one from that pattern is X can exclude Y. You will find that many times in empowering quotes. That pattern, the alternative use, is what you find in any self-help quote, like there is no failure, there is only feedback. Same thing, the meaning of X is actually Y, the meaning of failure is actually feedback. Same thing, and the X can actually exclude Y. The one example I found is, even though no life exists without love, no love demands that you give up your own life. That is an example of this pattern. You can use the same exact words and give them a different meaning. And obviously, any kind of human statement, any kind of limitation or statement anyone say, any kind of declaration you make about what you believe into, whatever, any kind of phrase being said by you or somebody else can potentially fit into different categories of that model, obviously, because the human language is too complicated to fit in only one category and not the other ones. Any phrase can fit different ones. The goal, again, is not to mention everything that does exist under the sun. It is about simplifying to how can you make those automatic in your mind. To that extent, I have included many examples of conversations broken down line by line, explaining this can fit here, and when this is being said like that, if you go into the resulting outcome, you just cancel what they said. And I'm giving you a lot of patterns like this, one by one, to automate all those operations in your mind, to automate them so that you won't have to think as much when you want to use it. The book should be out by January or February 2025, and or maybe slightly before that if I am really ending this quickly. And in the meantime, you can already download the 7 Steps to Master Sleight of Mouth, which was a small document I had written, I think 1 year ago, to give you examples of how, in which situations can you use which pattern and how can you adapt to the patterns based on your current level of skills, because not all of them will be easy to use based on if you are a beginner, an intermediate or whatever. So how can you dissect all of those and use only what is relevant for you based on your current level? Then one step at a time you can dive into more complicated strategies and develop your skills from that. You have this document down below in the description. Thank you for listening, thank you for the support, great to hear from you, and I will see you soon in the next video. Thank you.